It's basically human nature to just zoom out.
Right, yeah.
When we want to understand something, our first instinct is usually to reach for, like, the wide-angle lens,
Yeah.
the bird's eye view.
Absolutely. We want the massive, sweeping summary of a subject so we can feel like we have our arms completely wrapped around it.
Exactly. But welcome to the deep dive, where today we are doing the exact opposite. We are stripping away the wide-angle lens entirely.
Which is refreshing, honestly.
It really is. Because sometimes, the absolute best way to understand the world is to look at one tiny, incredibly specific thing.
We're basically focusing the microscope on a single drop of water to try and understand the entire ocean.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And the source material today is just a total testament to the power of that kind of hyperfocus.
It really is.
So we are looking at a single, highly specific journal entry. It's from an ongoing gardening journal written by an author named Ang.
And the date on this is May 23, 2026.
Right. And the title is just wonderfully precise. It's called Notes on Gardening, Part 903, The Beauty of the Abutilon Pictum, or Red Vein Indian Mallow.
Such a specific focus.
Our mission for you today is to take this one, seemingly everyday observation in a single garden, and uncover how it connects us to, well, the ruggedness of global agriculture.
And childhood nostalgia.
Yes. And the profound, almost lost virtue of botanical patience.
It is a remarkable piece of writing precisely because it lacks those sweeping, grandiose declarations we usually look for.
Yeah, there's no grand thesis statement.
Exactly. When you read an entry like this, you are stepping into a stream that has been flowing for a very long time, and it's dictated entirely by the slow rhythms of the natural world.
Okay, let's unpack this. Part 903.
It's a staggering number.
Just sit with that number for a second. 903. Think about anything you have done 903 times and meticulously documented.
Most people can't keep a grocery list going for that long.
Right. Most of us start a journal on January 1st with the best of intentions, and we abandon it entirely by, January 14th.
The sheer discipline required to write 903 parts of a gardening journal, it completely reframes the way we should read this text.
It really does. This isn't someone casually throwing some seeds in the dirt on a Sunday afternoon. This is an archivist of the soil.
And that number tells us everything about the landscape of profound observation we are entering here.
Yeah.
Because reaching part 903 of a journal means you have moved far beyond just recording external events. You are actively cultivating a long-term relationship with an environment.
You're fully dialed in.
Exactly. You're training your eye to notice the microscopic shifts, the slow arcs of growth, the subtle changes in cellular structure that a casual observer walking past the garden would just completely miss.
And Ang mentions right away that this specific post is a follow-up to part 691 of their journey with this specific plant, the Abutilon pictum.
Which is a huge gap.
Right. Which implies there were over 200 deeply detailed journal entries about entirely different things just in the time between updates on this one plant.
It's incredible.
And Ang writes that they acquired the specimen right around the, quote, last festive season. And now, in late May, they proudly report it's doing far more than just surviving. It is actually thriving.
And that distinction, between surviving and thriving, that forms the entire baseline for the science of cultivation.
Well, because my assumption with holiday plants is that they are essentially cut flowers with roots.
Oh, totally. Disposable decor.
Yeah, exactly. We buy a poinsettia or an amaryllis, we put it on the dining table because it looks festive, and by February, it is a withered stalk heading straight for the compost bin.
So true.
So to hear Ang say this plant is thriving months later, that challenges that whole life cycle. What physically changes in a plant's environment or its internal mechanics to take it from just not dying to actively producing complex new structures.
What's fascinating here is the energy economics of the organism.
The energy economics.
Yeah, so when a plant is just surviving, it's playing defense. Its biological resources are entirely consumed by triage.
Like it's just trying to stop the bleeding.
Exactly. It's frantically managing a lack of humidity, a sudden drop in temperature, or light that is just slightly the wrong spectrum. Every single ounce of energy goes into simply preventing cellular collapse.
Wow.
But when a plant thrives, it has achieved an equilibrium with its environment. Ang has created microconditions so perfectly attuned to the Abutilon pictum's evolutionary needs that the plant is no longer in a state of stress.
They can finally relax.
Yes. It finally has surplus energy, and it chooses to expend that surplus on reproduction and beauty.
And Aang provides incredible visual details of what that surplus energy actually looks like.
The descriptions are gorgeous.
They really are. They describe the bloom's color as a striking apricot, almost orange, but held together by these signature dark red veins.
Right.
It has this classic pendulous bell-like structure that earned it the colloquial nickname Chinese bellflower. And Aang notes that it literally looks like a small hanging lantern.
A really perfect image.
If you picture that in a garden context, it sounds like a tiny, glowing piece of stained glass hanging delicately among the broad green leaves.
And the stained glass analogy perfectly captures the mechanics of the petal, actually.
Oh, really? How so?
Well, those dark red veins Aang describes are not just decorative patterns, they provide an architectural framework.
Just like the lead lines in a stained glass window.
Precisely. Much like the rigid lead lines holding together the glass, they offer a structural integrity that supports the incredibly delicate apricot-colored tissue of the petal itself.
That is wild.
It is a highly engineered, vascular little structure just hanging there, suspended like a lantern to maximize its visibility to pollinators.
You would think the story peaks at that stained glass lantern. I mean, you buy a plant in the festive season, you nurture it for months, you get it to thrive, and it hangs these beautiful glowing structures in your garden.
The ultimate payoff.
Right, the visual reward is there. But the second those petals drop, the plant undergoes this gritty, almost industrial transformation. Aang notes that once the apricot petals fall away, a segmented seed capsule begins to form in its place.
Because the bloom, for all its visual glory, is ultimately just fleeting advertising.
Advertising, yeah.
Once the advertisement has worked and the invitation is answered, the plant immediately abandons the business of attraction. It pivots entirely to the business of legacy.
It's done being pretty.
Exactly. The drop of the petals is the closing of the factory doors to the public, so the internal manufacturing can begin.
But the timeline Aang lays out for this manufacturing completely throws me.
How so?
Wait, the flower's gone. Why does Aang have to wait a whole 1 to 2 months just for a pod to dry out? Why can't a gardener just pluck it the second the petals drop?
Because the visual absence of color completely masks a massive hidden biological operation.
So it's still working.
Very much so. During those 4 to 8 weeks, it looks like nothing is happening. You are just watching a green pod slowly turn brown. But inside, the plant is acting like a biological 3D printer.
Wow, a 3D printer.
Yeah, it is actively pumping complex carbohydrates, proteins, and vital genetic information right into those developing seeds. If a gardener were to pluck it the second the petals fall, they would be severing the primary supply line.
And the seeds would just die.
The seeds inside would be pale, completely immature, and biologically useless.
So the plant is actually engineering the seed's ability to survive independent of the mother plant.
Precisely. And that requires a process called senescence.
Senescence.
Yes. The drying out period Aang mentions isn't just the pod dying, it is deliberate, programmed tissue death. The plant purposefully withdraws moisture from the capsule walls.
Okay.
This causes the cells to harden in a process called lignification. It is essentially building a microscopic wooden vault to protect the embryos inside.
A wooden vault. That's incredible.
Preparing those seeds for the harsh realities of the outside world is a slow, methodical packaging process that simply cannot be rushed.
It demands an incredible amount of discipline from the human involved, too.
Yeah.
I mean, we live in a digital ecosystem where a 4-second delay on a loading screen induces anxiety.
Right. We want everything now.
And Aang is standing in a garden, looking at a bare stem where beautiful stained glass flower used to be, and willingly waiting up to 2 months just to harvest a dried-up brown husk.
It's a totally different mindset.
It really forces the gardener to completely abandon human pacing and operate on botanical time.
And botanical time requires you to respect the hidden internal structures of the natural world over immediate gratification.
Yeah.
Understanding that internal structure reveals something completely unexpected about the Abutilon Pictum, actually. It peels back a layer of the garden to expose a much larger global narrative.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Aang notes that the specific biological trait of forming this segmented seed capsule is shared by the broader botanical family that this plant belongs to.
Right, the Malvaceae family.
The Malvaceae family, yes. And this family includes some radically different members. It includes the hibiscus, which visually tracks. I mean, they share that delicate tropical look.
Sure, you can see the resemblance there.
But the Malvaceae family also includes okra, and it includes cotton. So you're telling me this delicate, glowing, hanging lantern flower is directly related to the cotton in the t-shirt you're wearing and the okra in a bowl of gumbo.
It is.
How do we reconcile an ornamental flower with heavy-duty crops? It feels like a massive leap.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it perfectly illustrates the profound divergence of evolution.
How do you mean?
When we look at a rugged, bushy cotton plant sitting in a massive sun-baked agricultural field, and then look at a delicate Abutilon tucked into a carefully curated garden pot, our brains categorize them as entirely different universes.
Of course. One is pretty, one is tough.
Right. One is built for utility and fiber extraction, and the other is built for aesthetic pleasure.
Visually, it's like finding out that a sleek, highly tuned Ferrari and a massive, mud-covered John Deere tractor are basically the exact same machine under the hood.
The Ferrari and the John Deere analogy gets right to the heart of how botanical classification operates. The outward chassis evolved to handle very different environmental pressures.
The paint job, basically.
Exactly. The paint job is flashy on the Abutilon and purely functional on the cotton. But the underlying engineering, the core reproductive engine connecting the generations, is identical.
That blows my mind.
The family is tied together by the specific mechanical way they propagate. That segmented capsule Aang is patiently watching for 8 weeks. It uses a mechanism called dehiscence.
Dehiscence?
Yeah. When the lignification process finishes, the capsule splits open along highly specific pre-programmed seams. That exact same splitting mechanic is what bursts open to give us a bowl of cotton.
No way.
And it is the exact same structure we slice up horizontally when we eat okra. The Abutilon is running the same reproductive software as a 1,000-acre cotton field.
The phrase reproductive software completely shifts the paradigm of the window box for me.
It really does.
This little Chinese bellflower is not just an isolated, pretty object purchased during the festive season. It is an ambassador for a massive, rugged, global family of plants sitting right there on a shelf.
And what elevates this journal entry from a purely scientific observation to a piece of literature is that Aang doesn't just discover this botanical family tree and leave it as dry taxonomy.
Right, they make it personal.
Yes. Aang immediately connects this massive scientific lineage directly to their own personal history. The transition from the mechanics of botany to the deep wells of personal memory is just seamless.
It is.
The scientific fact triggers a deeply emotional response.
Because Aang writes that they grew up on a farm, and as a child they spent time picking, or as they carefully clarify in the text, playing with dried okra seeds pulled from their husks.
It's such a specific memory.
It is. And because they now understand this ornamental bellflower is running the same software as the okra from their youth, Aang fully expects the Abutilon to display those exact same physical traits, just scaled down to a miniature size.
Right.
So what does this all mean? To me, it is the botanical equivalent of looking at a newborn baby's face and suddenly recognizing the distinct jawline or the eyes of a great-grandparent.
Oh, that's a beautiful way to think about it.
Aang is looking at this tiny, delicate lantern flower in a pot and seeing the massive, rough, farm-scale okra of their childhood staring right back at them.
And this raises an important question about the lenses through which we view our environment. You know, how much of our intellectual appreciation for the natural world in the present is secretly anchored by the physical, tactile memories of our past?
The tactile memories.
Yeah, because Aang isn't just recalling a distant visual of a farm. They explicitly highlight the tactile experience of playing with the dried husks.
The sensory detail buried in that one phrase is incredibly rich. I mean, anyone who has ever crushed a dried seed pod in their hands knows exactly what that memory entails.
Oh, absolutely.
There is a distinct, papery rustle. There is the sharp resistance of the dry husk right before it cracks under your thumb.
And then the seeds.
Yeah, the cascade of those hard, dense little seeds falling into your palm. It is an auditory and physical sensation that embeds itself so deeply into your muscle memory.
And that specific sensory memory forms a bridge spanning decades. It turns the cold intellectual realization of a taxonomic relationship into a deeply emotional anticipation.
It makes the waiting worth it.
Exactly. The grueling 4 to 8 week wait for the capsule to undergo senescence and lignification isn't just a lesson in botanical patience anymore. It transforms into a countdown to reliving a visceral childhood experience. When Aang finally gets to press their thumb into that tiny Abutilon pod and hear it crack along its segmented seams, the sound and the tactile feedback will transport them instantly away from the modern garden and right back to the dirt of that childhood farm.
And it really imbues the act of waiting with a kind of sacred weight. Ang concludes the journal entry with a statement of lovely, peaceful surrender. They write, quote, "So there's not much to do but watch and wait. I'm looking forward to seeing how they turn out."
Just letting it happen.
Yeah, there is no rushing it. You cannot hack the lignification process of a seed pod. You cannot optimize a childhood memory. You simply have to yield to the pace of the organism.
Which is fascinating. For an author who has meticulously documented 903 discrete stages of gardening, demonstrating an almost obsessive level of control and observation, this conclusion shows a staggering amount of humility.
Right.
The documentation is rigorous, but the gardener's fundamental attitude is one of complete submission to nature's unalterable timeline.
The journal becomes a record of bearing witness rather than a record of enforcing will.
Well said.
Let's trace the incredible terrain we've covered with Ang today. We began with a seemingly ordinary holiday plant purchase that defied expectations by flourishing into an apricot stained glass lantern.
We uncovered the intense hidden biological engineering.
Right, the deliberate senescence and lignification happening completely out of sight while a gardener patiently waits up to 2 months.
We revealed the evolutionary divergence that connects this fragile window plant to the rugged industrial reality of cotton and okra.
And finally, we saw how understanding that shared reproductive engine transforms a waiting period into a bridge directly back to the tactile, sensory memories of a farm upbringing.
It serves as a profound reminder that a simple observation in nature simply does not exist.
Not at all.
Every single organism contains an evolutionary history of the planet, and quite often a reflection of our own personal histories, provided we have the patience to look closely enough.
So take a moment today to look around your own immediate environment. Look at the mundane potted plants sitting on your windowsill, the weeds pushing through the cracks in the sidewalk, or even the vegetables resting on your kitchen counter.
What hidden stories are they telling?
Exactly. What massive hidden family trees are they a part of? What rugged agricultural cousins do they share mechanics with? What forgotten tactile childhood memories are sitting right there in front of you, just waiting for you to slow down and notice the connections?
When you apply Ang's level of relentless 903-part observation, the ordinary world completely stops being ordinary.
It demands an entirely different relationship with time. It demands that we stop scrolling past our environment and begin actually living within it.
It really does.
But before we let you go, there is one final, almost haunting caveat buried right in the middle of Ang's journal entry that completely recontextualizes the entire philosophy of this deep dive.
Oh, the caveat. Yes.
It is a tiny, incredibly humble phrase that is so easy to gloss over, but it carries the weight of the entire natural order. When Ang is describing the petals dropping and the initiation of that long 4 to 8 week wait for the segmented capsule to form, they add one massive condition.
Right.
They say all of this will happen, quote, provided the pollination did happen.
The ultimate admission of powerlessness, the great, terrifying unknown of cultivation.
Think about the staggering paradox of that statement. Consider everything Ang has done, the sheer unyielding discipline to write 903 journal entries, the meticulous environmental care required to keep a plant thriving from the winter holidays all the way into the warm days of late May.
The intellectual work, too.
Yes, the deep understanding of the Malvaceae botanical family and its shared segmented capsules. The emotional readiness to connect a tiny drying seed pod to the profound sensory memories of a childhood farm.
They've done everything right.
Ang has done absolutely everything a human being can possibly do to control the environment, set the stage, and prepare for the future. But ultimately, the entire legacy of the plant, the seeds, the architectural capsule, the emotional payoff of that agonizing 8-week wait, it all relies on entirely relinquishing control.
It all comes down to a completely unseen, random, chaotic interaction with a passing insect.
It is the exact moment the gardener must step back and confront the reality that, despite all their deep knowledge and all their meticulous effort, they are not the architect of the garden.
They are merely a stagehand.
A stagehand who sets the props, adjusts the lighting, and then just has to pray a random bee decides to show up and finish the job.
It's humbling.
It really leaves you wondering, in your own life, with your own meticulously planned projects, your own carefully controlled environments, and your own 900-sip journals, how much of your success is truly the result of your own control?
And how much relies entirely on the quiet, unseen work of the world around you?
Provided the pollination did happen. Something to mull over the next time you see a flower drop its petals. Keep zooming in. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.